Her mother presented her sisters to the Duke, but only she made his heart beat. Asterisk asterisk hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main characters. Lady Emily was the youngest daughter in a family that had seen better days. Her mother, a woman of great pride, had seen to it that her daughters were presented at every noble gathering, hoping one of them might catch the eye of a wealthy, powerful man. But among her daughters, Emily was the quiet one. Unlike her sisters, who dazzled with their beauty and charm, Emily felt like a shadow in their presence. On this particular evening, as she stood in the grand hall of a noble estate, her heart felt heavier than ever. Her mother had made it clear this was their chance. "You must impress him, Emily," her mother had whispered urgently before the ball. "The Duke of Alexander is a man of great power and influence. He could save our family from ruin." Emily nodded, but inside, she wasn't sure if she could ever be what her mother wanted her to be. As the evening progressed, Emily's gaze wandered across the room. The air was thick with whispered conversations and the clink of crystal glasses, but Emily was lost in her thoughts. She didn't belong here. She wasn't like the other women, who laughed easily and moved with grace. She was different, awkward, reserved. And then, she saw him. Duke Alexander stood across the room, commanding attention without even trying. He was everything her mother had promised, a man who could change their fate. He was tall, with dark hair that seemed to shimmer under the candlelight, and eyes that carried the weight of authority. His gaze swept across the room, never lingering on any one person for too long, until it landed on Emily. For a moment, everything around her faded. His eyes locked with hers, and she felt her heart beat faster than it ever had before. It was the first time in her life that someone with such power had truly looked at her. Not just glanced, but really looked. She felt exposed, yet strangely seen. It was as if everything she had ever wanted, to be recognized for who she truly was, had finally been given to her in that one moment. But before she could fully process the sensation, her mother appeared at her side, urging her forward. "Now, Emily, now is the time," her mother whispered, practically pushing her into the Duke's line of sight. Emily straightened her back, her hands suddenly clammy. As she moved towards the Duke, she felt every step heavy with expectation. She could hear the whispers around her, the polite murmurs of the guests, all watching, all waiting for something to happen. But it was Emily's heart that raced the most. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to play the part of the beautiful, confident lady her mother wanted her to be. And yet, there was no choice. Emily had to play along. The Duke, sensing her hesitation, smiled slightly, the kind of smile that was both polite and knowing. "Lady Emily, isn't it?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth. She nodded, her throat tight. "A pleasure, Your Grace," she managed to say, her voice betraying the nervousness she felt inside. His gaze softened ever so slightly. "The pleasure is mine," he replied, his eyes flickering with a curiosity that made Emily's heart flutter in an unexpected way. They exchanged a few more words, but Emily felt like she was in a dream. His presence was overwhelming, his power almost palpable. She had never felt so small in the presence of a man before. Yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, she also felt important. As the evening wore on, Emily found herself drawn to him again and again. Every time their eyes met, it felt like an invisible thread pulled her closer to him. And with each passing moment, her heart beat faster, more desperately, as if urging her to stop resisting the inevitable. But Emily knew better. She had to be careful. Her mother's expectations weighed heavily on her shoulders, and the future of her family depended on her ability to secure a match with a man like Duke Alexander. But somewhere deep inside, Emily wondered, was it possible that, just maybe, her heart was beating for him, and not just because of her family's expectations? As the night continued, Emily found herself standing alone in the grand hall, the weight of her mother's expectations pressing heavily on her chest. The whispers of the guests surrounded her like a distant hum, but all she could hear was the beating of her own heart. She had done what was expected of her, yet a part of her still felt uncertain, unsure of whether she had truly impressed Duke Alexander. The Duke, however, had not left her thoughts. His dark eyes had held a spark of something. Curiosity, perhaps, but she could not be sure. He was a man of great power, and Emily was just the daughter of a family on the brink of financial ruin. She had always been told that a marriage to someone like him could save them, but she wondered, was that all he saw in her? A means to an end? She couldn't stop thinking about the way his gaze lingered on her, how it made her feel like she mattered. But she couldn't afford to hope too much. She had seen the way her sisters dazzled him with their charm and beauty. They were everything a man like him would want. They were polished, refined, and confident, everything Emily was not. And yet, it was her, Emily, who had caught his eye. Or so she thought. Emily excused herself from the hall and wandered into the gardens, hoping the fresh air would calm her racing mind. The night was quiet, save for the rustling of the leaves and the distant sounds of the celebration inside. She walked slowly, her feet crunching on the gravel path. The moonlight bathed the garden in a soft glow, casting long shadows across the stone statues and the fountains. Emily stopped at the edge of the pond, looking out over the still water. It was then that she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, her heart skipping a beat, to find Duke Alexander standing a few feet away. His tall frame was silhouetted against the night sky, his expression unreadable. "Lady Emily," he said, his voice low and steady. "I did not mean to intrude. I thought you might appreciate some quiet after such a lively evening." Emily swallowed, her nerves making it difficult to speak. "Your Grace," she said softly, her voice betraying the nervousness she felt. "I was just thinking." The Duke stepped closer, his eyes studying her with a mix of curiosity and something else, something that made Emily's heart flutter. "Thinking about what?" he asked, his voice warm, though there was still a formality in his tone. Emily hesitated, unsure if she should reveal her doubts. "About my family," she said finally. "About the expectations placed on me." She paused, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I'm not sure I am the right choice for a man like you." The Duke raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Why do you say that?" "Because I am not like my sisters," Emily replied, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "They are everything a man like you would want. They are beautiful, confident, and charming. And I am none of those things." The Duke was silent for a moment, his gaze never leaving her face. Finally, he spoke. "You are wrong, Lady Emily. You are everything I want." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The Duke stepped closer, his hand reaching out as if to touch her, but he paused, allowing her space. "I see you, Emily," he said softly. "Not as your mother sees you, not as your sisters see you, but as you truly are. You are more than just a beautiful face or a charming smile. You have a quiet strength, a kindness that speaks louder than any words." Emily's heart raced as she looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of mockery, but there was none. He was serious, and in that moment, she felt as though he truly understood her. "But I am not perfect," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "No one is," he replied gently. "But it is in our imperfections that we find our true beauty." Emily's chest tightened as the weight of his words sank in. She had never thought of herself as beautiful, but in that moment, she wondered if perhaps she was wrong. Perhaps there was more to her than she had ever realized. The Duke smiled, a rare and genuine smile, and for the first time that night, Emily felt something shift within her. It wasn't just the pull of expectation anymore. It was something more, something real. "You are more than enough, Lady Emily," he said quietly, his voice filled with a tenderness that left her breathless. "I see you, and I admire you. Don't ever doubt that." Emily could barely believe what she was hearing. Could it be true? Could someone like him, someone so powerful, so important, really feel this way about her? She wanted to say something, to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She simply stood there, staring at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, the Duke stepped back, his expression softening. "I should let you return to the ball," he said, his tone shifting back to the more formal one she was used to. "But remember this, Lady Emily. You are more than just your family's expectations. You are more than what you think you are." With that, he turned and walked back toward the mansion, leaving Emily standing in the moonlight, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She had not expected this. She had not expected to be seen. But for the first time, she felt as though she had just caught a glimpse of a future she never thought possible. The next morning, as Emily awoke in her bed at the Grand Estate, the events of the previous night felt like a dream, almost too surreal to be real. She had hardly slept, her mind replaying the Duke's words over and over again. She had spent her life feeling invisible, overshadowed by her more confident sisters, yet Duke Alexander had seen something in her that no one else had. It was hard to believe, but in her heart, she knew he meant every word. She had never imagined that someone like him, so powerful and respected, would look at her with such understanding, such tenderness. As she dressed and prepared for the day, Emily's thoughts kept drifting back to the garden, to that moment when the Duke had told her she was more than enough. It was like a weight had been lifted from her chest, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she mattered. After breakfast, Emily found herself walking through the halls of the estate, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The mansion was vast, almost too grand for a family like hers, but it was here, in this beautiful yet lonely place, that she felt something stirring within her. She had never allowed herself to hope before, not truly, not in a way that meant anything. But now, with the Duke's words still fresh in her mind, she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to life than the expectations placed upon her. Was there a chance for her to be something more? As she wandered through the estate, Emily caught sight of Duke Alexander again, standing by one of the windows, looking out over the gardens. His presence was as commanding as ever, but today, there was something different in his demeanor. He wasn't the distant figure he had been the night before. There was a warmth in his expression, an openness that Emily hadn't seen before. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should approach, but before she could decide, he turned and saw her. "Lady Emily," he said, his voice filled with a quiet sincerity. "I hope I didn't disturb you last night." She shook her head, stepping closer. "No, Your Grace. I've been thinking a lot." The Duke raised an eyebrow, his gaze softening. "And what, may I ask, have you been thinking about?" Emily paused, gathering her thoughts. "About what you said. About me." She could feel the heat rise to her cheeks as she spoke, but she pushed through, determined to be honest. "I've spent my life trying to be what others wanted me to be. I've always felt like I didn't quite measure up. But last night, when you said those things, it made me realize that maybe I've been wrong about myself all along." The Duke studied her intently, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You are not wrong about yourself, Lady Emily. You are exactly who you are meant to be, and that is enough." Emily's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this before, not with such certainty, such respect. She had always felt like an outsider, like someone who didn't belong in the world of nobles and royalty. But now, standing before Duke Alexander, she began to wonder if she had a place here after all. The Duke took a step closer, his eyes meeting hers with a depth of emotion that made Emily's breath catch in her throat. "I know that the expectations of your family weigh heavily on you," he said, his voice soft. "But I see you for who you truly are, Emily, and that is what matters most." Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. It was as if the world had shifted around her, as if everything she had known before had been turned upside down. She had spent so long doubting herself, believing she was not worthy of love or attention, that hearing the Duke's words felt like a revelation. She had never imagined that someone like him could care for someone like her. "But I'm not like the others," Emily said, her voice trembling. "I'm not beautiful or confident like my sisters. I'm just me." The Duke reached out, his hand gently touching her arm. "And that is what makes you beautiful, Emily. You are unique, and that is something to be cherished." Emily looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, yet there was something in his gaze that made her feel safe, as if he truly understood her. "You don't need to change for anyone," he continued, his voice steady and reassuring. "You are enough just as you are." For the first time in her life, Emily believed it. She wasn't just someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's pawn in a game of marriage and wealth. She was Emily, and that was enough. As the Duke's words sank in, Emily felt a wave of emotion rise within her. She had spent so long hiding who she really was, afraid that she wouldn't be accepted, that she had lost sight of her own worth. But now, standing in front of the Duke, she realized that she didn't need to hide anymore. She could be herself, and that was enough. And maybe, just maybe, there was a future for her here, in this world she had once thought was out of reach. She wasn't sure what that future looked like yet, but she knew one thing for certain. It was hers to shape. As the Duke stepped back, giving her space, Emily felt a new sense of freedom, a sense of possibility she had never known before. And as she watched him turn and walk away, she couldn't help but wonder what might come next. For the first time in her life, Emily felt like she was in control of her own story. The next few days at Greycourt Hall were nothing like Emily had imagined. After her conversation with Duke Alexander in the garden, she found herself in a whirlwind of emotions: hope, fear, excitement, and uncertainty. She had never expected her life to take such a dramatic turn. The Duke's words had shaken something deep inside her, but the path ahead was still unclear. Every time she saw him, her heart fluttered in a way she couldn't explain, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still far from where she wanted to be. Duke Alexander was everything she had ever dreamed of: powerful, noble, commanding, but he was also a man of his own burdens, his own past that she had yet to fully understand. She had glimpsed a side of him that few others had seen, a side that was kind and thoughtful, yet guarded. Emily wondered if there was a way for them to connect more deeply, or if she was just another fleeting distraction in his life. As the days passed, the estate became her new world. She spent most of her time wandering the halls of Greycourt Hall, the sprawling mansion that was now both her sanctuary and her cage. The silence of the place often overwhelmed her. Despite the grand dinners and the lively atmosphere of the occasional gathering, Emily always felt a quiet loneliness that seemed to haunt the mansion. The staff was polite, but distant, and Emily often found herself alone in the vast gardens, trying to sort through her thoughts. One evening, as she walked by the grand fountain in the estate's gardens, she once again found herself face to face with Duke Alexander. This time, the encounter felt different. There was an ease between them, a familiarity that hadn't been there before. She had grown more confident, not just in her interactions with him, but in herself. The conversations they shared now were no longer awkward or forced. They talked about books, music, and even their pasts. Emily was surprised to find how much they had in common. "Lady Emily," the Duke said, his voice warm as he stepped closer to her. "I must say, I've come to look forward to our talks. I find them refreshing." Emily smiled softly, her heart warming at his words. "And I've come to enjoy them as well, Your Grace. It's nice to have someone to talk to without expectations, without the constant pressure of titles and duty." The Duke looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something deeper that Emily couldn't quite place. "It's a rare thing to find, isn't it?" he said, his eyes searching hers. "Someone who can see beyond the surface. Someone who can appreciate the real person behind the mask we all wear." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had always felt like she was wearing a mask, pretending to be someone she wasn't, someone who fit the mold of what her family, society, and even the Duke expected her to be. But with him, she didn't have to pretend. With him, she could be herself, or at least, she could begin to find herself again. "It's strange," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the longest time, I thought I had to be someone else to be accepted, to be loved. But now, I'm not so sure." The Duke's gaze softened, and for a moment, it felt like the rest of the world faded away. "You don't need to be anyone but yourself, Emily," he said, his voice low and sincere. "That is more than enough." Her heart raced at his words, and in that moment, she felt an undeniable connection with him. She had spent so many years doubting her worth, wondering if she could ever be enough for someone like him. But now, she was beginning to believe it. The Duke took a step closer, his presence surrounding her, but not in a way that felt overpowering. It was gentle, steady, like a promise. "I never wanted a life of expectations," he continued, his eyes locked on hers. "But it is the life I've had, and I have to live with that. But perhaps there is room for something different, something real, with you." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of hope she had never dared to believe in before. "What are you saying, Your Grace?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The Duke smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made Emily's heart skip a beat. "I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, we could find something real together. Something beyond titles, beyond obligations. Something just for us." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had imagined a life like this, but to hear it from him, to hear him say it aloud, was something she could hardly believe. Could it be possible? Could a woman like her, someone with so little, truly have a future with a man like him? The Duke reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and Emily felt a spark of something electric pass between them. It was a simple touch, but it spoke volumes. "Emily, you are more than enough," he said again, his voice filled with conviction. "And I want to explore that, to see where this could lead us." Emily's heart soared as she looked into his eyes, realizing that, for the first time in her life, she didn't have to hide. She didn't have to pretend to be someone she wasn't. And maybe, just maybe, she could have the life she had always dreamed of, with him by her side. With the Duke. And for the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to believe in a future filled with possibility. As the days passed, Emily found herself caught between the reality of her family's expectations and the new world that was unfolding before her. Every time she saw Duke Alexander, her heart would race. And yet, there was still a lingering uncertainty. Could it be that this was really happening? Could a life, so full of duty and obligation, truly transform into something personal, something real, just for her? The answer, it seemed, lay in her willingness to embrace what had begun to unfold between them. Each day, the connection between Emily and the Duke deepened. Their conversations grew longer, more meaningful, and as much as Emily tried to fight it, she found herself looking forward to every moment spent in his company. But her reality was far from perfect. Her mother continued to pressure her, whispering constantly about the need to secure a match that would save their family, reminding Emily of the importance of her place in society. Emily had always known that her life was not her own, that it had been dictated by the needs of her family. But now, for the first time, she felt something within herself stir, something that said, perhaps she could choose her own path. But the Duke, though kind and encouraging, had not yet declared his intentions. Emily wasn't sure if he saw her as more than just a distraction from his own sorrow. His past was shrouded in mystery, and there were moments when Emily caught a glimpse of the man he once was, before grief and duty had hardened him. On one such evening, as Emily and the Duke walked together through the estate's private gardens, the silence between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. The moonlight bathed the path in a soft glow, and the scent of jasmine filled the air, but Emily's mind was elsewhere. "Your Grace," she said, breaking the silence, "I cannot help but wonder, what happens next?" The Duke stopped and turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight as he regarded her with an intensity that made Emily's breath catch in her throat. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "I mean," Emily hesitated, her heart racing, "what happens after all of this? After we've shared these moments, after we've grown close, where does it lead?" The Duke's expression softened, and for a moment, Emily thought she saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something that resembled vulnerability. "I have been thinking about that very thing," he said quietly, taking a step closer to her. "I never expected to find someone like you, Emily. You have shown me a side of life that I had forgotten, a side that is not driven by duty or obligation, but by something more, something real." Emily's heart swelled at his words, but doubt still lingered. "But is that enough?" she asked softly. "Is it enough to just be ourselves, without the title, without the expectation?" The Duke reached out, his hand brushing against hers in a gesture so gentle that it sent a shiver down Emily's spine. "It is enough for me," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "But I cannot speak for the rest of the world." Emily looked down at their joined hands, the warmth of his touch grounding her in that moment. "Then what are we to do?" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "What is the next step?" The Duke's thumb brushed across her knuckles, and he took a deep breath, as though he, too, was weighing his words carefully. "The next step," he said, "is one that we take together, Emily. We face whatever comes, no matter what it may be, with honesty and courage." His words were simple, yet they held a weight that made Emily's heart feel as though it were about to First, he was offering her a future, one that didn't rely on titles or riches, but on something far more important: trust, respect, and love. It was a future that was uncertain, yes, but it was one that they could shape together. Emily's eyes met his, and for the first time, she felt as though everything she had ever doubted about herself, the insecurities, the fears, began to melt away. She wasn't just a woman to be chosen for convenience or duty. She was Emily, and that, it seemed, was enough for him. She smiled, the first real smile she had allowed herself in days. "Then I suppose the next step is for me to trust you," she said, her voice soft but filled with newfound confidence. "And I do." The Duke's lips curved into a smile, one that made Emily's heart race all over again. "I'm glad to hear that, Lady Emily," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "Because I do not want you to doubt yourself, not ever again." With those words, he stepped forward, his hand gently cupping her face, and for a moment, the world seemed to disappear. All that mattered was the connection between them, the promise of something real, something true. And in that moment, Emily knew that whatever the future held, she would face it with him by her side. As their lips met in a kiss, the storm that had raged in Emily's heart for so long finally calmed, and she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She wasn't just the daughter of a family in crisis, and she wasn't just the woman who had been caught in a game of social expectations. She was Emily, and she was about to embark on a journey that was hers and hers alone. As days passed, the connection between Emily and Duke Alexander continued to grow stronger, but the outside world seemed to be closing in on them. Emily found herself torn between the love and support she had found in the Duke's presence and the heavy expectations that her family and society placed on her. Though she had made up her mind to embrace the possibility of a life with him, the world around her was a different story. Her mother's constant reminders of duty and obligation still echoed in her mind, and she couldn't escape the pressure of securing a marriage that would save her family from financial ruin. Every conversation with her mother felt like a reminder that her happiness was secondary to her family's survival. "You cannot waste time, Emily," her mother had said just days before. "The Duke is the only chance we have. He is wealthy, powerful, and willing. Do not squander this opportunity." Emily had nodded, but inside, she felt a storm brewing. She wanted to be honest with her mother, to tell her that she no longer wanted to live a life dictated by duty and obligation. But how could she say that when her family was so close to losing everything? How could she ask her mother to understand when all her mother cared about was their survival? The Duke, too, had his own burdens. As the days turned into weeks, Emily saw him less and less, his duties as Duke keeping him busy, and the pain of his past still lingering like a shadow. He had shown her glimpses of the man he once was, the man who had once believed in love, but the walls he had built around his heart were still very much in place. Emily wondered if she could break through them, if she could help him heal, but at times, she felt like she was losing him. He was always there when she needed him, but his eyes often seemed distant, lost in his own thoughts. One evening, as they walked together through the garden, the air heavy with the scent of blooming roses, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Duke Alexander had been quiet for days, his usual warmth replaced by a cool reserve. "Your Grace," she said softly, her voice tinged with concern. "Is something bothering you?" The Duke stopped walking, his gaze drifting to the ground, as if searching for something he couldn't find. "I'm afraid it's me, Emily," he said, his voice strained. "I've been distant, and I've been trying to figure out why." Emily's heart ached at his words. "You don't have to explain," she said, stepping closer to him. "But if something is troubling you, I want to help." He looked up at her, his expression guarded, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something that told Emily he was ready to open up, ready to let her in. "I don't deserve you, Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so many years building walls around myself that now I'm not sure I know how to be the man you deserve." Emily's heart skipped a beat at his words. "You don't have to be perfect," she said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. "I see you, Alexander. I see the man behind the walls, and that is who I love." The Duke closed his eyes, as if her words were a balm to a wound he had carried for so long. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with a tenderness Emily had never seen before. "You are everything I never thought I deserved," he said, his voice thick with emotion. And I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want to find it with you, Emily. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her as she heard his words. For the first time, the uncertainty that had plagued her heart began to fade. She had always known, deep down, that their connection was real, that their love was something worth fighting for. But hearing him speak those words, hearing him express the same feelings she had been holding in her heart, made everything feel right. Then let's take that step together, she said, her voice filled with hope. Let's face whatever comes next, as long as it's together. The Duke smiled, a smile so genuine that it made Emily's heart soar. Together, he repeated, taking her hand in his. They stood there, in the quiet of the garden, their hearts finally aligned, their futures now intertwined. Emily knew there would still be challenges ahead, her family's expectations, the weight of society's judgment, and the uncertainty of what lay in the future, but with the Duke by her side, she felt like she could face anything. For the first time in her life, she was no longer defined by what others thought of her. She was Emily, a woman in love, ready to embrace the future on her own terms. As they stood together, hand in hand, Emily couldn't help but think that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. She had found the one thing she had always longed for, a love that was real, a love that didn't depend on titles or wealth, but on the connection they shared. And as the night sky stretched out above them, Emily knew that, together, they could face anything life threw their way. As the days passed, Emily and Duke Alexander's connection grew stronger, but their path was not without obstacles. The pressure from Emily's family remained relentless, her mother still pushing for the marriage to take place sooner rather than later, believing that this union would be their only salvation. Emily found herself torn between the love she was beginning to feel for Duke Alexander and the expectations her family had placed on her shoulders. Yet, despite the pressure, something in her heart told her that this was the man she was meant to be with. Duke Alexander, too, was facing his own inner turmoil. While he had expressed his desire to be with Emily, he still carried the weight of his past, a past filled with loss, pain, and responsibilities that had shaped him into the man he was today. He had not been free to love for a long time, and now, with Emily in his life, he found himself struggling to reconcile the man he had become with the man he wished to be. One evening, after a long day filled with heavy discussions and familial obligations, Emily found herself alone in the drawing room of Greycourt Hall, her thoughts swirling around the events of the past few weeks. She had spent so much time worrying about her family's future that she hadn't allowed herself to fully consider her own happiness. Her gaze drifted to the window, where the evening sky was painted with hues of orange and purple, and for a moment, she wondered if she could ever truly find peace. It was then that Duke Alexander entered the room. He stood in the doorway for a moment, his figure silhouetted against the fading light of the day. His presence filled the room, and Emily felt the familiar flutter in her chest. She had missed him. "Lady Emily," he said softly, his voice warm, though there was an underlying note of uncertainty. "May I join you?" Emily turned, offering him a gentle smile. "Of course, Your Grace." He stepped into the room, his eyes searching hers as if weighing something important. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone hesitant. "I know the pressures you are facing, the weight of your family's expectations, and I cannot ask you to ignore them. But I also know that what we have, what we are building, is real. And I want to give us a chance, a real chance, to see where this could go, without the shadows of duty hanging over us." Emily's heart raced as she listened to him. His words were everything she had hoped to hear. Yet there was still the matter of her family's expectations, and the very real consequences of defying them. "But how can we?" she asked quietly. "How can we when everything I've ever known is tied to these expectations? My family, my future, it all depends on this marriage." Duke Alexander stepped closer, his expression softening with understanding. "I know, Emily," he said, his voice tender. "But your happiness is worth more than any alliance, more than any title. I will not let you sacrifice your joy for the sake of duty." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this, with such certainty and care. For the first time, she felt as though her happiness mattered, as though she had the power to choose her own future. "And what about you?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "What about your responsibilities, your title, your duty. Duke Alexander paused, his gaze searching hers as if contemplating the weight of his own words. I have lived my life by duty for so long, Emily, he said, his voice low. But in you, I see something different. I see someone who lives with heart, with kindness, with a sense of purpose that I had forgotten. I want to be a part of that. I want to build a life with you, where we are not bound by what others expect, but by what we truly want. Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his words. She had always feared that her own desires would never be enough to overcome the expectations placed upon her. But in this moment, with Duke Alexander standing before her, offering her a life of love and understanding, she felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. Are you saying you would be willing to defy everything, to defy your title, for me? She whispered, her heart racing. He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. I would, Emily. For you, I would give up everything if it meant we could be together, truly together. Emily's heart swelled with emotion as she stepped closer to him, her hand reaching for his. Then I will take that step with you, she said, her voice steady now. I will face whatever comes, as long as we do it together. Duke Alexander's expression softened, a look of relief washing over his face. He took her hand in his, gently squeezing it. Together, he repeated, the word filled with promise. In that moment, Emily knew that they had made a decision that would shape their future, whatever that future may hold. They would not be bound by the expectations of their families or society. They would carve their own path, together. And for the first time in her life, Emily felt a sense of peace, knowing that love was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. As Duke Alexander leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was soft, tender, and filled with unspoken promises, Emily knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. A journey that, despite the challenges they would face, would be theirs to share. The days following their decision felt like a whirlwind for Emily and Duke Alexander, and yet, in the midst of all the chaos, there was a sense of calm between them. The weight of their decision had not been easy, but together, they had made it. They had chosen each other, not because of duty, not because of family expectations, but because they truly saw each other, truly understood the deep connection that had begun to form between them. But as they moved forward, the world around them did not stand still. Emily's family was growing increasingly anxious. Her mother, despite all the promises she had made about supporting Emily's happiness, continued to press her for answers, pushing the marriage to be finalized sooner rather than later. The weight of her mother's expectations was hard to ignore. You are playing with fire, Emily, her mother had said one afternoon, after Emily had told her once again that she was not ready. The Duke is a prize, and if you don't act quickly, someone else will take him. Do you really want to lose out on the only chance we have? Emily had tried to explain, to tell her mother that love was not something to be rushed, but the words fell on deaf ears. Her mother, like so many others, saw the Duke as a means to an end, a way to secure the future of the family, not as a man who could truly offer Emily a life filled with happiness and choice. Meanwhile, Duke Alexander had his own struggles to contend with. His responsibilities as the Duke of Greycourt weighed heavily on him, and though he had never spoken much of his past, Emily knew that there were parts of him still buried under layers of grief and duty. She often caught him in moments of silence, his gaze far away, as if lost in a past he could not escape. She longed to help him, to break through the walls he had built, but there were moments when she felt like a stranger in his world. Alexander, she said one evening, as they sat together by the fire, the crackling flames the only sound filling the room. I see the weight you carry, and I want you to know that you do not have to carry it alone. The Duke turned to her, his eyes dark and filled with something Emily could not quite place. You are kind, Emily, he said softly, his voice tinged with sadness. But there are some burdens that I cannot share. Emily reached out, gently taking his hand in hers, the warmth of his skin comforting against her cold fingers. You don't have to share everything with me, but you do not have to shut me out either, she said, her voice steady with the conviction she felt in her heart. We are in this together, Alexander. Whatever comes, we will face it side by side. His eyes searched hers, and for a long moment, there was only silence between them. Finally, he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You are right, Emily," he said quietly. "I have been holding on to things for so long, but perhaps it is time to let go." Emily's heart swelled with relief, but she knew that this was only the beginning. The road ahead would not be easy, and there would be many challenges to face, not just from the outside world, but from within their own hearts as well. They both had pasts that shaped who they were, but together, they could build a future that was entirely their own. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, letters, and decisions. Emily continued to navigate the delicate balance between her love for Alexander and the pressure from her family. She was torn, but every time she looked into Alexander's eyes, she felt the strength to keep going. Their love, despite all the obstacles, was becoming more real with each passing day. One evening, as Emily sat in the garden, the last rays of the setting sun casting a golden glow over the flowers, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Alexander approaching, his expression serious, yet there was something in his eyes, something soft and determined. He stopped before her, taking her hands in his. "Emily," he began, his voice steady, "there is something I need to tell you. Something I have been holding back." Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it, Alexander?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "I cannot stand by and let you carry the burden of my title, of my family's expectations," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "I have decided that I will not be bound by duty any longer. I will follow my heart, and my heart tells me that I belong with you." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. "But your title, your responsibility." "I am the Duke of Greycourt, yes," he said, his voice firm. "But I am also a man with my own desires, my own dreams. I do not want a life dictated by what society expects of me. I want a life with you, Emily. A life that is ours, free from the pressures that have always weighed us down." Emily's heart soared, her doubts slipping away like the fading shadows of the night. "You would do that for us?" she whispered, barely believing the words. "For you," he said, his voice full of love and certainty. "I would do anything." And in that moment, Emily knew that they had chosen each other, not because of obligation, but because of love. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way, but for the first time, it didn't matter what the world expected of them. What mattered was that they had found something real, something worth fighting for. As Alexander leaned in to kiss her, the world around them seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them standing in the garden, ready to begin the life they had always dreamed of. As the days passed, Emily and Duke Alexander's life began to take shape in ways neither of them had expected. Their decision to be together, despite all the pressures from their families and society, had not been an easy one, but it was the right one. They found themselves growing closer with each passing day, their bond strengthening in the face of the world's judgment. But as they embraced their future together, they knew that challenges still lay ahead. The whispers from society did not stop, and Emily's mother, despite her initial hopes, was not entirely supportive of the idea of Emily marrying for love instead of duty. Emily could feel the tension in her mother's words each time they spoke. "I cannot understand why you are so determined to follow your heart, Emily," her mother had said one evening, her voice heavy with concern. "This is not just about love, it's about securing our place in the world. The Duke has given you an opportunity that many would envy." Emily had listened to her mother's words, but her heart was certain. "I know, Mother. I understand the stakes, but I also know that I have to live my life, not just for the family, but for myself. I cannot marry someone simply because it's what is expected of me." Her mother had no response to that. Emily's mind was made up, and despite the doubts that lingered in the corners of her heart, she felt a sense of clarity she had never known before. The love she shared with Duke Alexander was something worth fighting for, and she would not let anyone, not even her own mother, stand in the way of that. On the day of their official engagement, as Emily stood before the gathering of family and friends, her heart was pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, but when she looked into Duke Alexander's eyes, everything else seemed to fade away. He was standing beside her, his presence calm and reassuring. He took her hand, and she felt the strength of his grip, the promise of his words, and the certainty that this was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. "Emily," he said, his voice steady as he looked into her eyes, "I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am right now. standing here with you. We have chosen this path together, and I know that no matter what challenges come our way, we will face them with courage and love." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with emotion as she nodded. "I feel the same, Alexander. Together, we can build a life of our own, one that is not dictated by the expectations of others, but by our own choices and desires." Their vows, though simple, were filled with sincerity and love, and as they exchanged rings, they knew that this moment was not just the joining of two people, but the beginning of a new life, one they would create together on their own terms. The ceremony was followed by a celebration, but it felt different from any other event Emily had attended. This time, there was no pretense, no masks, only the joy of two people who had found something real. As the night wore on, Emily found herself dancing with Duke Alexander under the stars. The music played softly in the background, and the soft breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of peace she had never known before. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed together. "I never thought this day would come," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "But now that it has, I can't imagine my life without you." The Duke smiled, his lips brushing her forehead as he held her closer. "Neither can I, Emily. Neither can I." In that moment, Emily knew that their love, though tested by challenges and obstacles, was stronger than ever. Together, they had faced the uncertainty of the future and had chosen to walk down a path filled with hope, love, and possibility. As the night came to an end, Emily looked around at the people gathered around them, their smiles and laughter filling the air. She realized that, despite everything, she had found something that was truly hers. She had found love, and it was a love that was not bound by titles or expectations, but by the deep connection they shared. And as she walked beside Duke Alexander into the future, she knew that they would face whatever came their way as long as they had each other. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Emily felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was no longer defined by what others expected of her. She was Emily, and she was finally free to live her life, to love freely, and to embrace a future filled with endless possibilities. And with Duke Alexander by her side, there was nothing they could not overcome.